All right, so I saw this headline on social media the other day. It said, a new study suggests that Proposition 22, a law that companies like Uber and Lyft said would improve worker conditions while keeping rides and deliveries cheap in California, has instead dropped drivers' hourly wage to around $6.20. And this was from Wired. I saw other articles from, like I mentioned, Wired, MarketWatch, Go Banking Rates, and it was covered, not everywhere in the media, but definitely covered. And, I have to say, wow, this is a catchy description, but honestly, I think it couldn't be more inaccurate. So let's dig in and find out why. All right, if you haven't already, please go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so that you know every single time we release a new video. Now, this headline, from this survey, I'll quote unquote survey that found Uber drivers were making $6.20 per hour. Honestly, I thought could not be more inaccurate. And, I guess this video is a bit more of a rant, but I really haven't seen a single mainstream media article that did a good job covering this. I saw a segment that Sergio and Chris did on our live show, Show Me the Money Club, every Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Pacific, where, I thought Sergio had some pretty good analysis. So I'm going to echo some of what he said and add on to it, but definitely make sure you guys check out Show Me the Money Club with Sergio and Chris. And I think we're even going to be having one of the authors of this study, of this survey on in the future to sort of explain their side of the story, since we like to present both sides. So headline of this, I'll call it a survey or study. Drivers' median net take-home earnings are just $6.20 per hour under Prop 22. Wow, that sounds bad. Doesn't sound like a lot. $6.20 per hour. No one can tell you with a straight face that that's a lot of money. But the report also says that drivers' gross earnings were $26 per hour. And so this was a time period, I believe, at the end of 2021, November, December. So right in the middle of, the pandemic. And also, remember, I think November, December is typically a pretty busy time. And then, January through February and March tends to slow down a bit. And, basically what they're saying, though, is drivers in their study were making $26 an hour. If you take out all the expenses and benefits that drivers would have gotten if they were employees, they now only earn $6.20 per hour. I mean, what's the issue, though? The only issue is that they're not employees. So it's sort of like, kind of a completely, I don't know, inaccurate or false equivalency, right? The analysis makes no sense, right? Like, yeah, if we were from Mars, it'd be really hard to get home, right? So it's sort of like, it doesn't make much sense. I mean, if anything, I would kind of actually argue that driver earnings during the pandemic actually went up, right? Like, we posted, screenshots from Sergio, driving in Los Angeles. And he's one of the top drivers. He was earning $50 to $60 an hour at the height of the pandemic, right? With lots of bonus, lots of surge, tons of rides. And I'm not saying that every driver in Los Angeles could do that. You got to be one of the best drivers, but just to highlight, right? Like that was not possible a few years ago, and that's not possible right now either. So, I think that is important. And then also, we had this global pandemic, right? So it caused a huge 2-year driver shortage and a spike in earnings. So that doesn't really, add up. I think drivers were on average kind of earning around $15 to $20 per hour before expenses, before the pandemic. So, let's say they're, for example, right, if they're earning $20 an hour before and $5 an hour in expenses, that would be a net of about $15 an hour. During the pandemic, drivers were earning closer to $30 an hour in major cities on average. And, top drivers like Sergio were more like 50 to 60. So even if expenses doubled, right, if they went from 5 to 10 an hour, and $10 an hour is a lot in expenses if you really go in and add up the gas, the amount of money you're spending on gas and the depreciation and things like that. Every single hour, that would still be $20 an hour net, right? So that's sort of saying, my point is that your pay, likely should have gone up during the pandemic, right? And then obviously, towards the end of the pandemic, it started coming down with high gas prices. And, also obviously now there's more competition, less bonuses, which I think we've been doing a pretty good job covering. But this study didn't look at any of those periods. They looked at the height of the pandemic. So that's sort of why I call bullshit on this analysis. It doesn't, really add up or make sense to me. And this is also one area where, I've sort of defended Uber so far, but also say Uber doesn't do themselves any favors because they selectively release very confusing earnings data. So they don't have a lot of credibility to push back here either. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. So point number 2, 21 drivers participated in this survey. 21. I literally laughed out loud when I saw that number. I mean, like to be, to have an article in the mainstream media, you would hope that there would be a much better and less biased sample size. I mean, I don't think, like a high school newspaper would have even published a survey based off a data set that this is this small, given that there are 1.3 million gig workers in California, as the report itself claims. So, the other big thing is there's a huge bias since, Rideshare Drivers United, they're basically a union organization for drivers. I mean, I'm all for them doing what they want to do, but it's not if it's to say drivers are earning $6.20 per hour, which I think is unequivocally false. So this puts a huge slant on the type of drivers that they attract and that would even join the organization in the first place and then participate in a survey like this. And then there was only 21 drivers worth of data, right? So I'm not sure like why Uber always gets skewered when they pay for a survey that shows favorable numbers to themselves, and then the same level of scrutiny doesn't really apply to their opponents. I mean, Uber's over here on the earnings debate, as you guys know, Rideshare Drivers United, and this survey is over here. And then I think the reality is probably somewhere in the middle, like a lot of things in LA. So either way, I mean, I think, Uber routinely reported during the pandemic that drivers in the top cities like Los Angeles, like I remember getting lots of push notifications saying drivers were earning about $30 to $31 an hour during the pandemic. So even that is $5 an hour more than the gross number that this report found. So even if you sort of use all their biased and, kind of small sample size and all that, it would actually be $11.20 per hour net that they would have found. I think if they would have used a more accurate average, even that I think is still low, but you can sort of see how, that can bias the results very easily. I mean, there's a ton of, I think the big thing that we always try to hammer home to people is that there's a ton of variability in the gig economy. If you're making $5 an hour right now, that's because you are doing something wrong, right? You are not going out there and being one of the top drivers, right? Like if you're just going out there and taking any old request that comes your way and driving at the worst times and worst places, like, yeah, you're probably not going to make that much money. But I think as we've shown from a lot of our top contributors like Sergio, who is literally posting screenshots every single week of him earning 50 to 60 an hour during the pandemic, like if you know what you're doing, you can make a lot of money. If you do everything and you still can't get there, that's fine. But I guarantee, that you're going to be in that average or above average. And that's sort of what we try and help you do. So I think that's important to note. And then, I guess, again, right, like the sample size, 21 drivers is kind of ridiculously small. I mean, 1 to 200 drivers would have been the bare minimum, I think, in my mind for this type of analysis. And then at least make an effort to diversify the sources. Okay, Rideshare Drivers United, were some of the drivers, and then they recruited some via, taking rides in Uber rides and, talking to drivers and asking them if they want to participate. And then maybe, doing some Facebook group posts or ads or, just something to at least try and diversify the sources. Like they didn't even try. That's pretty lazy if you're going to ask me and, do like an official survey with some official group. So number 3, and I guess I got 4 points. So number 3, I won't rehash the whole expense debate. I think I've covered this pretty extensively in the past. We did a big interview with the Cornell professor, which I'll leave a link to in the show notes. But the gist is that this study looked at earnings and then added on a bunch of employee expenses. As I mentioned, drivers aren't employees, so this doesn't really seem like a fair analysis. And, even if you dig into their assumptions on the expense side of things, there's a lot up for debate, right? If you're a part-time driver, you already have insurance, you already have a phone, there's no extra cost for you there, right? But if you're a full-time driver, maybe 90% of that would apply, you would want to count that as expenses, right? So I think that's, just right off the bat, that's a big flaw there too, and why they come up with, $20 an hour in expenses when I think, we've got a cost per mile article and some of the top, if you got a great deal financed, a used Prius, you're probably going to be more in like that $4 to $6 per hour total cost of ownership for your vehicle and expenses and things like that. So the other thing that is really important is that this analysis completely forgets the fact that, independent contractor drivers, they get to deduct all the miles that they drive, plus all of your expenses. So you can easily get your earnings on your Schedule C cut in half. Or, I think Jay even did an article, where he grossed over $100,000. And after all the deductions, he was like close to zero, right? If you're really aggressive, right? And that's not for everyone. But when we talk about rideshare earnings, we're talking about our profit after taxes, right? And in the real job world, we talk about earnings before taxes, right? So, we have a good example because it's kind of confusing in our cost per mile article. I'll leave a link below, but basically an $18 an hour real job, wage, let's say you're working for Amazon or McDonald's, it's kind of the same as actually earning $15 an hour rideshare if you take into account all those taxable deductions. So that's the other thing to keep in mind. Then number 4, I saw just something really quickly. I won't get into every single point of this study, but they said that rideshare work has become less flexible and more controlled by rideshare companies under Prop 22. Again, right? Like, I'm not sure what, what these guys think would happen. They want drivers to become employees, right? So if they're saying that Prop 22 made it less flexible, like just imagine if drivers became employees, it's going to get way more less flexible, right? They're going to tell you when to drive, where to drive, what to do, what to wear. So, we saw this in New York City. They instituted a true minimum wage. And now Uber, guess what? They won't let you just log on whenever and wherever. You can't log on a Tuesday, in the middle of nowhere if they have to pay you $25 an hour, right? That doesn't make any common sense, right? So there are some restrictions and, some drivers don't like that. Some drivers do, but you have to understand, right? If you're going to ask for something, there's going to be something that they take in return. I'm a fan of that minimum wage system, but you have to understand, there's always trade-offs in life. So, okay, rant over. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to, if you made it all the way to the end, feel free to leave a comment below, and definitely would love to hear from you. We'll also be covering this, as I said, on the future with some of the authors of this study and maybe some Rideshare Drivers United members. We'll give them the chance to sort of respond on our Show Me the Money Club live every single Tuesday at 3 p.m. with Sergio and Chris, and also leave some links in the show notes below to some of the segments that we did on Show Me the Money Club, some of the interviews and articles that I referenced too. But would love to know what you think. What do you think about this survey? Do you think it should have even been covered in the media? Do you think Uber drivers are earning $6.20 per hour after expenses? How much are you earning, and how do you think about your earnings? All right, take care.